So the holiday season is coming by. You might want to be buying, various electronic items, as gifts or even a gift to yourself. Now, sometimes you actually hear of people doing research before they buy a device, and you might be wondering, well, how do I do that? What steps are there in research? Today, we're gonna actually break down some of the steps I use when I do research for buying a new device. Hopefully, this will be able to help you make better purchases, purchases that are more worth the money, and in a way, you know what you're getting. So yes, let us talk about the art of research after the break.
This is 0612 TV.
Welcome aboard.
Hello YouTube and welcome to the art of research. One of my corniest titles yet, but well, this will probably be useful information for you nonetheless. I've actually broken down my entire research process into 6 different steps. So well, there is very much more to say about this, so let's jump right into step number 1. First, research yourself. That's right, you want to actually take a close look at what your needs are. If you're buying a camera, you might want to think about things like, do you take more photos or do you do more video? And if you're taking stills, you might want to think about, say, do you take more portraits? Do you take more nature photography? Same goes for other devices. If you're buying a tablet, you might want to think about whether you're going to be playing more games or whether you're going to be just watching videos. Exactly the same deal for a desktop. Are you going to be doing more word processing or are you going to be playing a lot of games? First and foremost, before moving forward, you want to actually crystallize what your expectations are, what your needs and wants are from this particular device, so that you don't get something that doesn't fit your needs, because ultimately that will make it a wasted purchase. Only when you're done with that do you move on to step 2. Now, translate your needs to specifications. This will of course require one of 2 things, either some knowledge or some Googling. Doing this will be extremely easy if you have a lot of technical knowledge, but if you don't, Google can help you a lot as well. The intuition is something along these lines. For example, if I was buying a desktop for the purpose of playing games, obviously I'll be looking into things like the graphics card to see, what kind of graphics can support. If I was looking into a camera for the purpose of video, perhaps I like to shoot action videos, so I want a slow motion mode on my camera. So essentially what you're doing is you're translating your needs into actual features that you want in your device. You'll probably spend a bit more time on this step because you want to actually try to map all your expectations to a technical detail, and of course, these are the technical details you will be, insisting on for the final product. Now we move on to step 3. You now have a good picture in your head of what kind of device you want. However, what you have in your head at this point of time is just, a rough sketch of what you want the device to be. What you're going to try and do now is to actually match this to physical devices on the market. This is another Google heavy step. You actually want to look for generic terms, things that will kind of match the expectations you have. To go back to the example of the gaming desktop, perhaps you might want to Google something like heavyweight desktop, something along those lines, or even gaming desktop. If you have any brand preferences, now will be a good time to put it in as well. For example, you could say something like heavyweight HP notebook, something along those lines. As mentioned, the objective of this step is to crystallize what you want to a number of different devices. Don't forget to use the information you've gathered from step 1 and step 2 to help you out. Narrow your range to a reasonable amount, because once you go to the next step, we're actually going to be comparing technical details straight up. If you have too many items to be compared, it will make things very time consuming. If you've narrowed things down to just a couple of different models, your efforts will be more focused. So we move on to step 4, basically the most crucial step in this entire series of steps. Step 4 is to scrutinize specifications. What you're going to do in this step is to actually take a closer look at all the devices you've picked out in step 3. What you want to do now is you want to grab the model number of each of those devices you identified in step 3. And what that means is I want more than a generic name. For example, saying a Nikon Coolpix isn't enough. You want to actually, make it identifiable by saying something like Nikon Coolpix P500. And then what you want to do is you want to Google that with the word specifications at the back. When you Google for specifications, what you tend to get is a list that looks something like this, Essentially, it lists out all the technical features of that particular device. This gives you extremely concrete information listed out in an extremely convenient manner, and once you actually do this for every one of your devices, you can then compare individual specifications. There is of course one thing not commonly found in spec sheets that you also want to compare at this point, and that is the price. Using the information you've gotten so far, you will now need to weigh your priorities, decide how much you want to spend and how much features you can forego. At the same time, of course, we're going to keep going back to step 1 to make sure that essentially all your expectations are really fulfilled by this device. By the end of this step, ideally you should have one device in mind. However, you can have an allowance of up to 2 to 3 items, because of course we have 2 more steps for you to make your final decision. By now, of course, you should have a very good idea of what the device is going to be like, what it can do and what it cannot do, and of course you should be satisfied with its price point. Pretty much by the end of step 4, you should be quite convinced about making that particular purchase, and to actually just really seal in this idea, we're going to actually take 2 more steps. Step number 5, read reviews. So essentially what you're going to do now is you can actually look for reputable sites and look for in-depth reviews and basically read through it, preferably from top to bottom so you don't miss anything. At the same time, don't stick to the review from just one site, get multiple opinions and see where the shortcomings are. Important things you want to look out for is, first, of course, it needs to do everything you wanted to do. Even if the specs agree that something can be done, read up the reviews to see if there are any objections to the idea. Also look for things like battery life. Some devices might be amazing but have kinda terrible battery lives. If that is the case, you might want to reconsider. At the same time, also consider your usage pattern. If something has a bad battery life, but you are always within range of a charger, then it becomes less of an issue. You also want to look out for things like build quality. If a particular device is amazing in specs but has a tendency of falling apart, you might also like to reconsider. Remember that we are only talking about reputable reviews over here. Make sure you are looking at, some reasonably well-known sites. We're going to talk about more amateur reviews later on. Right now, focus on the really well-written, intelligent reviews. If you still had multiple choices by the end of step 4, this step will actually, kind of help you pick out the better one of the multiple items. Hopefully by the end of this step, you'll be able to filter down your choices to just one item. So now we move on to the very last step, step 6. This step is actually less important, but still good to know stuff. What you'll be doing for step 6 is to read user feedback. Essentially, you can Google for things like model number problems to, see if there are people complaining about certain problems. Other good places to look include forums that, kind of discuss something close to this particular product, as well as the comment section for professional reviews of the product. Now, the thing about user reviews is, especially as we've seen in an earlier episode of Highlight Sundays, we actually heard of how some of these user reviews can be rigged. Not to mention, of course, there might be trolls, not to mention there might be people who don't really know what they're doing, which means what you're aiming for at this stage is an aggregate. If there are 1,000 positive reviews and then one guy who said it exploded, he's kinda the outlier. The bottom line is, when reading user reviews, you need to know how to take things with a pinch of salt. In general, it's only a cause of concern if a huge number of different people, make a particular complaint. If you want to be even more sure about this, you might want to look up more reputable sources to see if they actually mention this problem. After going through these 6 steps, you should be able to move from wanting a rough, device to actually picking out a device you want, confirming its specifications, and reading up to make sure that, most people don't have an issue with it. Of course, along the way, you'll have to convince yourself that the price is okay as well. And once you've come to this point, perhaps you are more ready to make the purchase. At any rate, that's how I kind of do my research on buying new devices. It has served me well. I don't think I've ever made a purchase that I really regretted. So yeah, perhaps that is something that you might want to think about. Just a little footnote, this one isn't really related to any of the steps, but perhaps it's more related to your thinking in general. The idea is this: if you have a very low budget, do look out for, devices that are offered at the low end of a budget. Most of the time, they have to scrimp and save on something, and essentially when they do that, you are getting a product that is, kind of broken in a way. From my personal experience, if you want to go for really cheap stuff, chances are you won't be entirely happy with the way it works. To quote a very good example before I go, I actually bought this netbook for about 400 Sing dollars. The currency conversion will be somewhere on screen. Essentially, it's a netbook that kind of fell apart. After not using it for a while, the battery died, the Wi-Fi unit died as well, and from the very beginning, the whole thing felt kind of slow and clunky. It actually ran Windows 7 Starter Edition on like a 1 GHz single core processor, and that was really less than ideal. When you start to go towards the lower end of the price range, these are some of the things that might happen. So my advice to you would be to, actually try to put in a little bit more money to get something that is a bit more well-rounded. Anyway, that's pretty much all there is for this Wednesday episode. If you have any comments, queries, or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow the official Twitter account for this channel at twitter.com/0612tv. As always, I appreciate every like, favorite, and subscription you give me. Happy shopping! Until next time, you're watching 0612TV.